వీడియో వచ్చింది మేడం. వచ్చింది.
A very good afternoon to everyone. I hope you all are able to hear me. Today, we will be looking at Unit 2, and this focuses on international marketing, environmental analysis. So, after studying this unit, you should be able to understand the nature of international marketing environment, identify and examine the key environmental factors that affect international marketing, and also explain what are the environmental factors that contribute to international marketing decisions. So, let us first start with the introduction and proceed from there. So, in terms of introduction, what we need to first understand is the degree of foreign companies' access and success. It relates a lot to the amount of surrounding marketing environment and the ability of business firms to respond immediately and in a very diligent manner to the factors that are contributing to either sorry to either promote or restrict your product introduction to a new market. So, what are these various forces that affect your business? It could be in terms of both internal and external factors. So, when we talk in terms of internal factors, there are two aspects that we need to understand. Typically, when we talk in terms of an environment, for a firm, we say internal factors are those that are within the conditions of the company, which they are able to either modify, adapt, change, or immediately respond to. An external or macro environment is that which needs to be understood, which is external to the environment. Here, when we are talking in terms of a company which is introducing itself to a new market internationally, it is not only the political and environmental and legal forces that would be at the macro level from the host country, but also the home country. That means if a company is belonging to, say, India, India is the home country. And if we are introducing a product to an Australian market, then Australia becomes our host country. So the factors are both micro, that is internal, and macro, that is related to both home country and host country. So we need to understand what these factors are, we need to analyze them, and more importantly, we need to anticipate about them. And why is this anticipation important? Anticipation is important because we are prepared for the future. So if a company is not prepared for the future, then they may not be able to respond in a timely and uh, the right way of action that may be required. For example, if there is some constraint with the political changes that happen in a country, maybe there is a sudden change in government, there is a sudden introduction of a new law which restricts certain products, new tariffs that are being availed, which may restrict the margins for your company. These are some of the factors which would require to a company to respond immediately to the market forces. So that is why it is not necessary to plan and adjust, but it's equally important to anticipate for what may come up in the future. So, in terms of an international marketing environment, let us first look at the meaning. So, when we talk in terms of environmental analysis, it is defined as the process by which strategists monitor the economic, government, legal, market or competitive, supplier and technological, geographic, and social settings to determine opportunities and threats to their firms. So if you see in terms of the various factors, there are a number of them. So what is equally important to understand here is each of these factors will have a force to play in the changes that are happening within the company. So it is not a set of just a controllable or internal factors as we have been discussing, but there is also a set of external, that is uncontrollable forces. And we know that we cannot change the law of a country. We cannot change the political nature of a country. However, the product line that we offer internationally is within our control. So that is where the differentiation comes in. So international marketing uh, also has certain factors that are internal, that are domestic, that means the home country, and global marketing forces, that is the host countries where we are supplying our goods or services. So, what are the important environmental factors that we'll be discussing primarily today? First and foremost is the demographic environment, then the economic, social and cultural, political and legal, technological, and finally the regulatory or law or legal factors. So let us go first to the demographic environment. Demographic environment of a country explains the pattern of population and other changes in the society. It could be in terms of the cities, the regions, or even the nations itself. Like we were discussing yesterday, Asia Pacific or APAC could be a region, NATO could be a region, Africa could be a region, European bloc could be a region, right? Whereas if we talk about India, it is a nation. So Asia Pacific would consist of multiple nations. So that is how we are trying to understand this market. So it is to be best explained in terms of the age, classification, the gender, the educational level, marital status, size of family, household patterns, religion based classification, and even nationality. If you're operating in multiple countries, then definitely we have to understand that we need to adapt a product to all these factors which will determine how successful we are in a global platform. So, when we are talking about age factors, for example, the same product which we are selling to different age groups would be vastly different. For example, apparel is a very broad stroke in terms of the kind of product that I'm offering. But we need to understand that the apparel that is worn by working women versus men, formal and informal clothes, age, youngsters, teenagers, office goers, middle aged patrons, and senior citizens, the kind of requirement, the kind of comfort, the kind of labels, the kind of style and fashion that each group is looking at would be very, very different. So, our segmentation of the product and the kind of positioning we make is based on these demographic factors. If we were to see in terms of the recent reports, it is said that about 76% of the world population who are residing in the less developed regions of the world. So, what may sell in developed countries like, say, the US or Japan may not necessarily sell in less developed countries. So that is why we need to understand the ethos of each country, each region before we start selling. So it's also important to understand that consumer behavior tends to be influenced by the educational level, and hence marketing strategy for a product or market is to be decided accordingly. There was a point in time where mobile phones were being accessed by only a limited number of people. It was mostly considered that people who are technically savvy, technologically savvy, can only operate a mobile phone. Today, we notice that a smartphone is in the hands of everyone, irrespective of age, gender, educational level, income. So, the whole aspect of how a product evolves and how it is being offered in the market changes over a period in time. So we need to adapt accordingly. At the same time, we also need to understand that early adopters would be very different from more mature audience who would be adopting it at a later stage. So our strategy also has to change in terms of who would be the first to adopt a product, purchase a product, interested in buying a product, and start targeting them, and then go on tweaking a product or tweaking our strategies to suit a larger and larger audience. For example, if we were to take a car like Tar Rocks, primarily when we talked of Thar in the initial stages, it was always a car which was meant for people who preferred off-roading, people who wanted to go for adventure road trips. But today, Thar Rocks, the same car in a more with a more number of features, is being offered to as a family car. So the target has changed, the positioning has changed. However, the base product may remain the same. So the product has been adapted. So that is what we are trying to say. A product has to evolve, a product has to change, a product has to be receptive to the new environment. The second factor that we need to consider is economic environment. So when we are talking in terms of economic environment, we need to again study this in two ways. The first and foremost is from a macro point of view. So what is this macro point of view? Macro point of view fundamentally talks in terms of the larger picture. Who is our audience? But more than that, it is not just the consumers or competitors, it is also, as we have been discussing, the government, the regulations, and multiple other things. And the second one is the micro environment. That is the stakeholders who are within the company and how are they influencing the market decisions. So, in terms of an economic advancement of a country, we can broadly characterize it in the following ways. The first one is high gross national product and income. So there is a lot of earnings in that particular company, or we can consider in terms of high per capita income. That means per individual, what is the level of income that is being made available that they're earning, and also what is their consumption of goods, what is their pattern, what kind of goods they purchase, what is the frequency, what is the market in which they are purchasing, and things like that. The third one is the lower population growth rate. So here, when we are talking of lower population growth rate, if you see countries like, say, China, which was one of the most populous states, you can say the most populous nations in the world, now actually the growth rate of individual has come down. However, if you see in terms of their population growth rate, there may be a slide, but the cost per unit in, say, a country like China may be far less than even other nations. So, this kind of change that is being brought about from time to time because of the environmental forces that are being played in the global arena. So, substantial amount of capital investment. Now, here two things that need to be understood. One is the investment that is being made by the company, and second is the kind of infrastructure or the kind of supportive systems that the host nation is ready to offer. Today, if you see, say, in India, a lot of states are vying with each other to attract a lot of foreign investments. Why? Because it is not just the people who are employed directly who are benefited with this process, but even on a larger scale, indirectly there is a lot, maybe 3x, 4x, 5x, or even more number of people who get affected, like their family, their relations, the township where it is being set up, multiple things, a lot of other, say even a kirana store guy or a supermarket would benefit if there are more people in that particular area. So it is kind of a snowball effect that is seen when we say it is a capital investment, but that also multiplies if there is proper infrastructure and more companies come into that particular area for their business operations. And of course, we are talking in terms of advanced transportation and communication facilities, because today, unless we have a well connected digital world, and the transportation from one end of the country to the other end is seamless, and not only within the country, but from one country to the next host country is seamless, only then businesses will actually invest, they'll grow, and so the filter will be down to the actual people who are residing in that area, as well as the nation at large. So the economic system, size of economy, economic politics and conditions, we know they vary from country to country. There's no single stroke for each country and every country. Everyone has their own system of economic importance, economic regulations, and also the kind of living standards that are expected or standardized in that particular country. So, the next thing we'll be talking about is the social and cultural environment. So, in a social or cultural environment, what are the factors that have to be considered? One would be the religious, next would be the language, the customs, the traditions, the beliefs, the family, taste, social institutions, etc. They all have a role to play in how a company, even after introducing their product, can ensure that there is sufficient sale of their products or goods or services. So that means for a company to have the right kind of business prospects, they need to understand the social and cultural environment of the host country where they are trying to set up their business. So the difference between the cultural background, say, in the United States and those of other nations like, say, Europe would be far different. So we cannot operate in the same way because the expectations are very, very different. Similarly, what is being offered in, say, Middle East would be very different from what is being offered in Southeast Asia, because the consumers are having different social and cultural contexts that come into consideration when they are purchasing a product or service. So, the more there is a shared belief or group norms that are embedded into the culture, the more the companies are able to take care of their business prospects in the right fashion. So, the best way for companies to overcome these social and cultural obstacles is naturally to adopt or adapt to the local culture. So, if we are talking in terms of an apparel, and we know that certain countries prefer certain style of clothing, then we need to modify our clothing accordingly. We cannot say what works in India will work in the rest of the world. If you were to consider this as a small example, say even brands like, let's take a local brand like Western, or let's take Lifestyle. So what happens is, these brands, what they sell in one area within the same city, and what they sell in another area within the same city would be very, very different. There can be some overlap, but there can be some changes in the kind of range of products that they're selling. And why is that so? Because the demographics of that particular area or region is far different from that of another area. The socio-economic factors vary, the cultural factors vary. So, if you see that within the same country, there can be so much of variation, or even in the same city, there can be so much of variation. Then, how much of variation would be there from one nation to another nation? I hope this helps clarify this point. The next one is the political and legal environment. So, business activity tends to grow and thrive only when a government is politically stable. So, where there are constant changes, where there is a fear of a coup happening at any time, where there is a probability that there is a dictatorship and that may, stop functioning after a certain period of time. In such cases, the company has to think, the business has to think. They have to consider in depth whether it is worth introducing their products in a politically unstable environment where they may not be able to sustain over a long period of time. So this needs to be considered. For example, foreign governments can intervene in multiple ways. How, for example, in terms of the contracts for the supply and delivery of products. It could be in terms of registration and enforcement of trademarks, brand names, labeling. Even brand names, people are very, very sensitive to how your product is being named. And you may even have to modify not only the style, the color, but also some of the alphabets to suit a different market. That could be in terms of patents and copyrights. So they may say that anything which is being patented from within their nation's boundaries would automatically belong to that particular nation. So these are all factors that need to be considered. And at the same time, the more common aspects like the pricing policies, the product safety, the acceptability, and environmental issues also need to be considered. So the politics and regulations of both the home country and the host country need to be considered. And if you are introducing your business products in multiple countries, that means your host country is having a multiplier effect. So that means a company has to be sensitive to so many different countries and the rules and regulations and the political stability of each of these countries in isolation. It is not only the host country where political instability is to be considered. The country from where your business is being operated or your home country, if the political environment is not stable and there could be some quick changes that are applied that could also affect your business in the future. So at the same time, business also need to understand the laws of the host country and the laws of the home country and how the twain shall meet. Because unless both are in tandem, both work together, a company cannot start its business internationally and hope to succeed in the long run. So their operations have to be considered in a lot of detail. And businesses are also affected in terms of the legal environment. That is, what is the law? What are the different laws and regulations? How is it operating within your own country? How does it affect when you go to a different nation? How does that country agree in or disagree in terms of the export or import of goods? So all these need to be considered. The next one would be in terms of technological environment. Technology is a major driving force, both in international marketing and in the move towards a more global marketplace. So, advances in technology could be in terms of not only the marketing process, It could also be in multiple other ways. For example, foreign workers must be trained to operate unfamiliar equipment. So you're exporting your products and you want to sell in a different market. Suppose there is a technical team who is supporting the installation and service of that particular product, say some machinery, then unless they're trained to be able to handle that machinery, they will not be able to succeed. So that means your company is destined to fail if you are not passing on the technology, uh, uh, information, technology based education to the foreign workers. At the same time, poor transportation systems, they may increase the production and physical distribution costs, which is very natural. It happens within the country as well. Maintenance standards vary from one nation to the next. For example, one of the maintenance standards could be in terms of how quick you are, how responsive you are to a service call. Is it within 24 hours, 48 hours, 36 hours? What kind of response? What level of response? And how quickly you are able to close the response? All these factors also need to be understood. Then, of course, poor communication skills. This is understood in any environment, but even more so when you're talking about a global market where your product is already unfamiliar to the local market. And if you are giving instructions in English in a Chinese market, then obviously there is going to be a gap between their understanding of how your product is being or is to be operated and what the actual facts are. So you have to give instructions in multiple languages. That is why today you see most documents have multiple languages in their booklet. And so you have at least four, five languages for even say a television or a mixer grinder. Even basic domestic products, they come with a lot of instructions in multiple languages to make it easier for people to understand across the board. At the same time, a lot of R&D has to be done to understand that there is a lot of technological advancement and alignment. It's not the advancement only, it is also the alignment to the host country that is to be considered. So, the level of technological development of a nation affects the attractiveness of doing business. So, therefore, we need to be upfront not only in terms of our product and services, but also in terms of the technology being adopted, the kind of language that is being used, what are we communicating, and how we are communicating. Let us also understand in terms of the regulatory environment. In a macro environment, that is, which is outside a business controllable factors, regulatory environment plays a key role. That means this would be in terms of the law of that particular nation. So much of the world's trade is regulated by regional or international organizations. We touched upon this a little yesterday, and we'll be talking a lot more today. So, if you see, in terms of the huge trading blocks that exist, like Europe, Central Europe, USA, Asia Pacific Rim, Africa, Middle East, and again within this, there are further subdivisions of these main trading blocks. So that means a product has to be aligned to all these factors as well, because the regulatory environment in that particular trading block can either break or make your business if you are not in pace with their requirements. So, if one some of the trading blocks that we need to consider, for example, ASEAN, that is Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or European Union or EU, as it is fondly known as, KU, that is Council of Arab Economic Unity, CARICOM, that is Caribbean Economic Community, CEFTA, that is Central Europe Free Trade is area. There are so many more of them. But while these are some of the trading blocks, we also need to understand organizations. So, trading blocks are a set of nations which are coming together, but there are also organizations which are active globally, which also regulate the kind of business and the kind of terms and conditions while we are selling our products. One of the more popular organizations that we can discuss here is the International Monetary Fund or IMF. Then we also have associations, that is Latin American Free Trade Association or NAFTA, that is North American Free Trade Association, which also have their own regulations. And these regulations may be beyond that host country's regulations. So there are multiple levels at which we need to consider when we are introducing a product in a new environment. And of course, one that most of us are very, very familiar with is the World Trade Organization, which is actually a successor to the erstwhile GATT or General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. So, one of the important things that we need to understand is there is no global legal system. Like we have blocks, we have organizations, we have nations, both at the host level and the home level. There is no one single global legal system. So, while that may actually simplify a number of processes when we are entering into an international market, it also has certain restrictions which by not being enforced, it will allow a country to take some of the regulatory decisions which are very, very personalized and customized to their nation. So, if I have certain resources like oil in my country, now my perspective on oil for either importing or exporting would be very different from another country which does not offer oil or which does not produce oil. So, that is how we need to understand. So, though there is no single global regulatory system, and it is either done at the national level, at the block level, or we have certain organizations like World Trade Organization which are done at a global level. However, they do set certain norms, but in some instances they cannot they can ratify, but they cannot insist that it has to be followed to the T, because the host nation may have a different perspective. So, overall, when we talk in terms of companies who are doing international business, they may all face many inconsistent laws and regulations. Coca Cola, for example, ran afoul of Italian law. And how did that happen? When they printed their ingredients list on the bottle cap rather than the bottle itself. So imagine something as minute as that. So instead of printing the ingredients on the bottle, they printed on the cap. And they went afoul of the Italian law, which said that you have to print all the ingredients on the bottle itself. So the Italian courts found that the labeling was inadequate. They said this creates unique challenges for foreign companies when they're entering into a new market. There are certain other things that we sometimes need to consider. For example, kickbacks, bribes, which may come into play to a certain extent when we are entering our operations into certain countries. So, though these are not spelled out in a written format, obviously, we still need to be sensitive to these discrepancies and be prepared for that. As a business, are we ready to accept these kind of bribes and kickbacks? What does our government say? What does our company say? What does the host country say? And what is actually happening on the ground? So these need to be understood. So a proper mechanism has to be installed by a business or a firm to make sure that all these environments are considered well in advance. There is sufficient marketing research that is done before they move to a new country. So, in summary, we can say that international marketing environment for any marketer consists of internal, domestic, and global marketing forces. Internal is internal to the company. Domestic is within the home country, and global marketing is the host countries where you're starting your business. So all these have to be amalgamated into your international marketing mix. So there are some differences which are natural. It could be in terms of the demographic, economic, social and cultural, political, legal, technological, or regulatory environment. So the market segmentation, the marketing decisions, and the marketing strategies have to be considered taking into account all these different forces that come into play. So, with this, we end today's session. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to share and address them. Okay. So, I think we are good for today. So, thank you and look forward to again see you in the next session.